Sweet Baby Inc. employee admits, and by the way, basically word for word admits, that their goal is to burn the games industry to the ground. This is something I don't really like talking about. Whenever I talk about this stuff, if you don't go far enough, people think you're sympathizing, where it's like, oh, well, you're trying to walk in the middle like a centrist and avoid taking a hardline stance. You got to be on my team or no team at all. Or people think that you are like basically calling for the abolition of civil rights or something. This is a consulting group that I did cover before, and there's a lot of groups like this, by the way. Sweet Baby Inc. is the face of it. Like, they've taken the brunt of the pushback, which, by the way, I do not condone harassment of anybody. I say leave these people alone, because at the end of the day, you're just giving them what they want, fuel for their victimhood complex. And also, you're just going to be the first thing they point to prove themselves right in a board meeting. So why give them that ammo? I just think that's idiotic. But I do think that their ideas and stances should be very open to criticism. I made a almost hour-long kind of expose going through a lot of the things with people around the company, things that they've done, how they don't represent their own values at all, and also how their values are just stupid. That I will link in the description down below. But for some highlights, we had people associated with the company running around dropping the N-word, but, always crying and screeching about how inclusivity and, all this stuff matters, yet you're the one dropping the N-word. We had fear-mongering about how if you don't, if a company doesn't see the value in their consulting, you should fear-monger them, let them know what can happen if they don't take you on as their team, or onto their team, basically, or with their team to consult. We had games journalists who are pretty much almost always sellouts. It's like 9 out of 10 of them are sellout shills who don't add anything to conversation, running to back up groups like this because they are all super liberal. And it's unfortunate because you can't have a stance on this. Like, people are going to walk away with this saying that, I was screaming some kind of German speech and saying everybody should hop on a train. That's not the point of the video. The point of the video is to look at what these people are saying, look at how dumb it is, dismantle it, and show you how backwards this is. Because this is a person who literally says that their goal is to burn the games industry to the ground. That's not a good thing. Like, it entered my view from a friend of mine, Alex Podcast Now, who covered it. And the original site that covered this was actually, it was That Park Place, which I know just like when, what one is it? The comic book one that pops up every once in a while that's very Republican leaning or like very right wing leaning, I would say. Bounding into Comics. Whenever like That Park Place or Bounding into Comics comes up, there's certain people who just shut their brains off and say, I know, listen now, came from bad source. Look, there are a lot of sources that I disagree with that sometimes will still present facts. And that's something I ask people to listen to, even when you see a source report something that you don't politically align with or agree with or whatever. My point with this is not to look at politics, but my point to this is to look at how people are using their own personal beliefs to dismantle things that you care about. And even if their personal beliefs align with yours, that's not a good thing because it easily paves the way for someone to come along whose personal beliefs are the antithesis of yours to do the same thing to you later on. It's the same idea of like, you let these people take an inch and they take a mile. And what makes me sad about it is that when I was younger, I remember one of my favorite shows, and still to this day, one of my favorite shows is like it's a very left-leaning show. It is actually Star Trek: The Next Generation. But what it does do is it doesn't just say like, at the time, left good, right bad, nor does it say the opposite. What it did was it asked questions. It asked its audience to ask questions. It brought up good points. It brought up faults with different systems and beliefs. I thought that was good writing. And my problem with people like this person, this Cameron Wild, is that I believe people like this are pretty much the opposite of that. They put their beliefs over the story. They put their opinions and where they stand over the story to the point where they're saying things like this. Because in a presentation, which was titled How to Get Away with Murder, Subverting Genre Expectations, kind of like the idea of, you're killing the genre without people noticing, but in their way, or in their idea, a good way. There was a Game Developers of Color Expo, which I didn't even know was a thing I'm all for, like, if you want to celebrate your heritage or whatever. But I do want to say that if I had the white gamers only expo, I don't know if that would go over too well either. That said, this person was talking about how they are a narrative designer and sensitivity reader. And if you don't know what a sensitivity reader is, it's basically someone who goes through and sees, oh, can this be taken poorly or not? Like, oh, you said this thing here. This is technically like a racial term or something. Shouldn't be a job that exists, but it is. And they were talking about how the stories we tell each other are way more than entertainment. So far, I agree, by the way. They are how we create debate and preserve our collective values and beliefs. Some people, by the way, are right now recoiling. They're saying, how can you have personal beliefs in entertainment? How can you have that kind of... We have that kind of stuff all the time. Power dynamics are a thing in all kinds of stuff. Even superhero stories. They're about people standing up for those who can't stand up for themselves. It's a form of power dynamics. It's just that it doesn't get labeled because it's good storytelling. So nobody stops to point it out and do a PowerPoint presentation and do a critique on whiteness or a critique on being liberal or a critique on being Republican or whatever. They just tell a good story, right? The reason why, and there's absolutely stories that have almost none or none of that too. But I don't think that this is really the problem. There are great stories like Metal Gear Solid, absolutely swarming with politics. No one bats an eye. Why? Because it's fun. It's a good story. It doesn't preach at you and scream at you other than just saying nuke's bad. War is not a good thing. That's really it. But this person went on and talked more about this and said, and we can and should make better, more expansive, more representational content. So you already can see that their goal here is not actually the content, it's being representational. Something that's not bad, but it is bad if you're prioritizing it over content. So they went on to say, cool, so why am I here? Burning the games industry to the ground. This idea of dismantling the games industry. They went on to say, so why am I still here? To prove that space where whiteness doesn't have to live is where some of the best stories are told. And so what's weird to me about this, again, just like if I, started up my white stories only conference or my all white gamers conference, that would be taken definitely the wrong way, right? I find this idea very odd. If I came into the room and I started telling you about how some of the best stories that we have in Western literature are from white people, you'd kind of be like, where is he going with this? Like, this is not a very good line of reasoning. Like, where are we going? Why are we talking about this? You'd be uncomfortable, most likely. Or you'd at least think, oh, this guy is not, this guy just, he's like the anti-Martin Luther King. He sees people by the color of their skin, not the content of their character. And I'm basically like doppelganger king here. You'd have a problem with that. But because this person isn't white, right? They come in and they say, hey, look, some of the best stories, they're from places where whiteness doesn't have to live. It's just weird. It's very pandering, very preachy. And again, this is the kind of thing that I would expect to see on a PowerPoint presentation in order to try and get funding from some big mega corporation that wants points. Not something that I would expect someone to actually believe in good faith and have no problem with if the opposite side was told. That would be called racism, right? But I genuinely do believe with a lot of these things where it comes with things that we shouldn't even care about anymore. Black people, white people, Asian people, Hispanic people, Native American people, not valuing their cultures and differences, but I mean viewing them as that. Like, a Native American walks into the room and you don't see a person, you see a Native American. Like, that's a problem to me. That's not something that really should be going on anymore. But, that's kind of where this line of reasoning leads. And this person went on to say, we're fighting for more inclusive games and storytelling. We don't have a choice when it comes to discomfort. A lot of us who are just existing don't have a choice, which makes this really hard often. But recently I started realizing that discomfort, or the place where whiteness doesn't have to live, is where some of the best stories are told, and it's where genre storytelling lives. And it's so weird to me because this to me is the opposite of inclusivity. And before someone thinks, oh, well, you're having a problem with this because you're white, you're having a problem with this because you're alt-right and you have this issue with what this person's saying because they don't agree with you, so I can slap this label on you because it makes it easier. My problem with this is actually not that this person is more left-leaning. My problem with this is not that this person is, in the video game industry, just, doing their work. My problem with this is that this person is prioritizing this kind of discomfort, this kind of exclusivity of storytelling, this kind of idea, and Alex said it best, actually, of almost like, well, non-white stories are actually some of the best stories, they're better stories. And they're looking at these things based off of these categories and not based off of the merits of story or not based off of what would be good for the game, not based off of the merits of any of that or entertainment or anything. They're just looking at it as a way to say, I've suffered. Now I'm leaving what Alex said, so don't put this on him. But basically this idea of like, I'm uncomfortable every day, so, that's a good thing. It's the same idea that we unfortunately see a lot in the real world of I've suffered, so now it's your turn to suffer. Like I went through this, or my ancestors went through this, or I'm going through this right now. It's less important to me that we even it out. It's less important to me that we try and do away with that suffering, but it's more important to me that I give you a taste of your own medicine, a taste of what that system gave me. It does become, unfortunately, a very political thing. I actually don't like talking about politics much on this channel because I find it not fun. I find it not entertaining. And unless it's like delving into the merits of a story where I'm, reviewing a movie or a game or any of that stuff, which I do and I prefer over this kind of thing, I think it's frustrating to talk about. And I think it's unfortunate because you don't get to have this conversation unless you say the right things. Like if I came in here and I said a big puff piece defending this group, defending this person, defending the people who were, associated with this company dropping the N-word, defending the people who were fear-mongering in order to get people to hire them to consult, there would be games journalists on my side. There would be people, in my audience who I guarantee already unsubscribed because they can't handle a differing opinion, who would be on my side for that. But because I don't have that opinion, if I say the wrong thing, which pretty much is just anything other than that opinion, we go right to buzzwords. We go right to this person's racist, or this person's a Yahtzee, or this person is hateful, or whatever. And it's unfortunate because there are people who genuinely do use fear-mongering, and they use issues like this to be racist. They use issues like this to be bigoted, to say, well, this is why black people don't belong in game development type crap, or to say, oh, look, women infiltrating the space and ruining it type crap when when there's a woman they disagree with. I've seen that all the time too. This weird, insecure, oh, but do I have to play as a girl in this game? Oh, geez, type thing. It's like there are people on the opposite end of the spectrum that I think are absolute brain dead idiots. Like I think that I'm genuinely surprised they're able to get out of bed in the morning and tie their shoes without tying them together and falling flat on their face like a cartoon character. So there's absolutely people on the opposite end of this spectrum who I cannot stand. Those people who hate any game with a black person in it, or anytime a girl shows up in a trailer and she's not naked, it's woke, or any of this crap, right? I hate it. But I'm also a fan of a lot of things that, people have taken and weaponized and said, oh, this is for gooners, this is for alt-right people, this is for people who hate diversity, hate minorities, all this stuff. Things like Stellar Blade, a game that I still make videos on my other channel, JayRPG, to this day. I remember when it was coming out, it was like, oh, this is like the alt-right's wet dream. It's about a sexualized woman and all this stuff. I'm so sick of this stuff, man. You can't have any opinion that is not hardline one way or the other. You can't even be moderate. You can't even be moderate and have a moderate take on this stuff. It's why I don't like talking about it. Because I know there will be people who leave this video with their own preconceived notion of me. And it used to really bother me. But now it's more just like, it just adds to it not being fun. But people are allowed to think whatever they want, right? I think it's just too bad that there are things like this where this group, the people around Sweet Baby Inc. and the people who were supporting them, I don't know if you remember this, and I cover it in my other video, they were genuinely pretty supportive, in my opinion, of a not very good harassment campaign towards just a person on Steam who had made lists of games that they worked on. Just saying hey, they were credited on this game. Hey, they were credited on this game. And that way, if you wanted to play those games, you could. If you didn't want to, you didn't have to. That person. They were going after that person. Like, these are not people who, in my opinion, spread peace and love. They're not people who spread equality. They're not people who embody the values that I believe in. Like, the values of Star Trek. I love those values. The values where it's like, you know, you got Jean-Luc Picard, you got Geordi LaForge, and you've got Data, and they're all serving on the same ship. One's a white man, one's a black man, one is a synthetic android, and they all deserve the same rights and privileges, right? That idea. Maybe they're different ranks for how they've worked up in the organization in Starfleet, but you know what I mean? Like, that future where people work together towards common goals because they're all people. You know, that's the kind of values that I believe in. But all of these things, they're not actually designed to bring us closer together. They're not designed to solve problems. These, you know, I'm going to burn this to the ground comments or these harassment campaigns or any of this stuff. They're things that are, one, a distraction, unfortunately, from the wear and tear and frustrations of your own life. And two, they are things that are made to divide us. They are things that are made so that instead of seeing your neighbor and saying, hey, buddy, how's it going? And liking your neighbor based on their personality or who they are, you see your neighbor and you see a black man and you're afraid to offend them. Or you see your neighbor and you see a woman and you're afraid to say the wrong thing or step on any toes. That's what these things are made to do. They're made to stoke the flames, really to make you uncomfortable, but not to make you uncomfortable for the sake of like asking questions, making you do introspective and talk to people, but for the purpose of trying to change things at the detriment of them. You know, for the purpose of like this person, if they were to go and work on something like Final Fantasy or Kingdom Hearts or something like that, based on the rhetoric they're saying, I wouldn't trust them to enter it and say what's best for the story. I would trust them to enter it and say, how does my narrative, how can that manifest in this story? How can I spread my truth? How can I spread my ideas or my idea of non-whiteness or any of these things? How can I spread that into this thing? And I think that that's very dangerous because what it does is at the least harmful, it just makes the product not as good. I mean, sometimes it's not even the core thing that makes a product bad. I've talked about Spider-Man 2 before. I think there's lines in it that are very preachy and dumb, like Spider-Man going off for, you know, a minute about how guns are bad, or, you know, how there shouldn't be a gun club in New York, or any of these like weird random things in there, right? There are things in there that are weird and just poorly written. There was also stuff like the multicultural musician or musical exhibition, which I thought was interesting. I actually thought it was kind of cool. You know, so it's like, it's not that you can't write those things, it's that you have to write them well. One is preachy pandery and plays along with the fact that there's almost no police in the game because people got triggered in the first game and said, oh, well, you know, this is propaganda, so we can't have that. Which I think, by the way, those whiny people are one of the reasons why Sweet Baby Inc. got brought in. You know, consulting groups like this, please don't get mad. We'll take the police out of the next game and we'll bring in a consulting firm. I think that's too bad because I think it sends the wrong message. It doesn't send a message of listening to your fans. It just sends a message to like bowing down to demands. You know, not like looking at it and saying, hey, what's best for our story, but instead looking at it and saying, hey, we don't want those people to be upset. Anyways, I had to split this up a little bit because I got busy, but I was basically going to end this video by saying that if you want to see more of the exact specific things that have been done around this company, you can watch my previous video. It's like 50 minutes long, so it is a bit of a time commitment, but it's kind of a discussion and look at those specifics. There's unfortunately a lot of bad actors around this company and around these ideas. I do think that, unlike what some people say, some of your favorite games probably do have some political themes or some kind of human interactive themes that could be spun to be whatever. Metal Gear Solid is a great example. You know, even the battle with good and evil, like Star Wars, there's elements of that. Star Trek, a lot of sci-fi has it. I mean, even the Alien movies, which are wildly popular, they have a lot of themes of corporate sabotage and capitalism out of control and profits before people. Like, there's nothing wrong with telling a good story that plays off of these elements or that touches on these elements. One of my favorite episodes of the original Justice League cartoon is actually about Jon Stewart, who's Green Lantern, who is a black man who goes back to his hometown and kind of how he interacts with the people there. Static Shock, for example, even in the DCAU as a cartoon, it comes up with a lot of these themes, where it will talk about how people are different or how, XYZ. I don't think there's anything wrong with these things. What I think is wrong with them is when you go into a medium, be it board games, like you see it in the tabletop game space, video games, movies, cartoons, whatever, and your entire goal is to, at sacrificing the quality of that thing, tell your specific viewpoint. So you want to go to Star Wars, not because you love Star Wars, but because you want to talk about racial dynamics. Or you want to go to Final Fantasy, not because you love Final Fantasy and you understand that there's, themes of dystopian ideologies and things like that in something like Final Fantasy VII, but say you wanted to go work on Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 here, not because you wanted to add to that world and because you loved it, but because you're like, I really want to talk about Marxism. I'm going to use this as a vehicle to do that, this pre-established thing, and I'm going to sacrifice its quality to do so. When you're talking about burning the games industry to the ground, or when you are, like some of these games journalists did, whether knowingly or unknowingly enabling a harassment campaign against Steam users, or when you are, doing any of these things, right? I feel like that is what you're doing. You are putting your personal ideology over the thing. You're not integrating it. You're not bringing your own, viewpoint from the world in and like expanding it. You're not doing anything to actually uplift that story or that world. What you're doing is you're just putting your personal ideas above the thing and basically giving the finger and saying, this isn't for you, to anybody who doesn't connect with that. And then labeling them things like racist, bigot, Yahtzee, whatever, ethnocentrist, I don't know. Any of these things, right? These things that become buzzwords online that unfortunately should mean you are like the worst of the worst. Like you're a human being that doesn't view other people as human and that you are scum. Those words that really should mean that have now just been co-opted to mean I don't like you and you criticized my way of thinking. So therefore, here's a label, LOL, I won the argument. That's what I have a problem with around SBI. That's why I have a problem with the companies like them, these consulting firms. And in closing, I think something Alex said in his own video that I think is really true is, if you have a team of writers and you need to bring in consulting firms, your writers probably suck. Either that or your company doesn't have any faith in their writing team, at which point I would not want to work at that company. But anyway, these are kind of my thoughts on it. I think this situation has unfortunately got worse. It seems like, because the internet has a 5-second attention span, these things blow over, people move on, and then they don't care anymore. I still care. Again, you want to tell a good story with human elements, be they religious, political, power dynamics, interpersonal or intrapersonal communication, any of these things, that's fine. People who say there should be none of that in games or movies, you would have maybe 1/10 of the stories that we have. And they wouldn't just be the good ones. They'd be a lot of plain ones too. I just think that it's unfortunate to see where this has gone and how many of these people there seem to be that put their own self in a selfish way above these stories that should, like this person actually said before, matter a lot to a lot of people. That's true. But instead you're tarnishing that and you're ruining it for everybody. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, you can leave a like, subscribe. I appreciate your thoughts. As always, we do have our Fortnite code DJAY123. We also have our own store, CosmoBunny.shop, where we make transformative art. I've talked about this several times. Coasters, keychains, trays, all kinds of stuff out of damaged comic books, manga, different things like that, magazines. We take them, we create transformative art for you guys to enjoy, so I hope you will enjoy that. And you can use code DJAY123 for 10% off your first purchase. I also do want to say a super quick thank you to my members. Appreciate you guys very much. We have channel memberships on this channel and also on my other channel, Degenerate Plays, where we hang out and play games podcast style together. So appreciate you. Have a great day. And as always, everyone, stay shui.